They said the housing boom would never end. Rates were low, demand insatiable, prices climbing every month. But here we are in 2025, and the sales are collapsing. What changed? Why is the market freezing when everyone expected more growth? And could what's happening now be the first crack in a collapse nobody saw coming? In this story, we'll unravel the chain reaction that brought the housing market to the edge, explain exactly why sales are tanking, show you the real numbers, and reveal what's next for buyers, sellers, and the economy. Stay with me, because the most dangerous turning point is the one you don't see coming until it's too late. To understand the crisis of 2025, we have to go back, not just to the pandemic, but all the way to the recovery after 2008. When the housing market collapsed back then, the response was simple: slash interest rates, ease credit, and let real estate pull the economy back to its feet. Over the next decade, homeownership wasn't just about having a place to live, it became the main path to wealth. Cheap money and low rates made houses feel like guaranteed investments. People bought, flipped, refinanced, and borrowed. Then came 2020. A pandemic, a shutdown, and a rush to move. With record low interest rates and trillions in stimulus, housing demand exploded. Families left cities for space. Investors saw opportunity. Builders couldn't keep up. By 2021, bidding wars were normal. Homes sold sight unseen, and people were offering tens of thousands over asking just to get in. But behind the euphoria, a few quiet problems were taking shape. Problems that would come crashing down in 2025. The first was rate lock-in. Millions of homeowners locked into rock-bottom mortgage rates, some as low as 2 or 3%. They didn't know it yet, but that decision would trap them, because when rates later doubled, moving became financially impossible. The second was affordability. Home prices shot up so fast that the median home became unreachable for most households. And the third was inequality. The rise of institutional investors, companies buying entire neighborhoods, made it even harder for families to compete. These were the cracks forming beneath the surface. By 2023 and 2024, the foundations began to shake. Inflation roared, and the Federal Reserve slammed the brakes, hiking rates faster than at any point in modern history. That's when the shock hit. Mortgage rates climbed from the 3s into the 6s and 7s. For a typical buyer, that meant hundreds, or even thousands, more dollars each month. Buyers didn't just slow down, they vanished. Demand fell off a cliff. Affordability collapsed. The same home that cost $2,000 a month 2 years earlier now cost over $3,000 to finance. Renters couldn't save. First-time buyers were shut out. Homeowners clung to their old mortgages, and as they did, inventory froze. Homes stopped moving. Sellers didn't want to list. Builders hesitated to start new projects, yet somehow, prices didn't crash right away. They just stalled, leaving everyone stuck. That was the setup for 2025. From the outside, it looked like the market was stable. No sudden crash, no wave of foreclosures. But inside the numbers, things were breaking. Home sales began to slide month after month. By March 2025, existing home sales dropped nearly 6% from the month before, the steepest monthly decline in years. Across the country, nearly a third of all major housing markets were already seeing price drops. 96 out of the top 300 metros were falling. Some by a few points, others by double digits. The news headlines began to shift. Housing market hits 30-year low. Affordability crisis deepens. Buyers disappear as rates climb. Builders, once booming, started canceling projects. The National Association of Home Builders reported its sentiment index turning negative again, signaling fear. Realtor.com called it a stuck market. Inventory was rising, but sales were falling. Buyers were waiting, and sellers refused to budge. It was a standstill, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for someone else to move first. The most affected areas were the ones that had soared the fastest: Austin, Tampa, Phoenix, Miami, Dallas. These cities, once symbols of growth, became ground zero for correction. Prices that had risen 40 to 50% in 3 3 years began slipping back down. The pandemic boom towns were cooling off and quickly, but it wasn't just about prices. The slowdown rippled through every layer of the economy. Real estate agents lost income. Mortgage lenders saw applications plummet. Furniture stores, construction workers, and home improvement retailers all felt it. With fewer people moving, the economy itself began to lose momentum, and yet sellers still refused to drop their prices. Many pulled listings rather than sell below value. Builders stopped new developments because financing costs soared. Everyone froze. The government tried to intervene. Some states offered first-time buyer credits. Banks experimented with rate buy-downs, and local officials pitched affordable housing programs. But nothing worked, because the real problem wasn't access, it was cost. People simply couldn't afford to buy. Meanwhile, regional differences widened. The Midwest and Northeast stayed steadier, mostly because they hadn't overheated. But the Sun Belt, the darling of the 2020s, was now oversupplied. Builders there had gone all in during the boom and were now sitting on half-empty developments. Still, there was hope that this was temporary, that rates would fall, demand would return, and the market would normalize. But that didn't happen. Rates stayed high longer than expected, and a new kind of stagnation set in. Not a crash like 2008, but something slower and stranger, a frozen market where nobody wins. To understand how unusual this is, we can look at history. In the late 1980s, rising rates caused a similar slowdown. The early 1990s saw home prices decline across parts of California and the Northeast. Japan's real estate crash in the 1990s lasted decades. And more recently, China's property crisis, filled with ghost cities, unfinished projects, and debt-laden developers, showed what happens when housing speculation goes unchecked. The difference in 2025 is that the U.S. market is not collapsing from debt defaults. It's collapsing from paralysis, and the data are sobering. A new CBRE study revealed that only 1 in 8 renters in America can afford a median-priced home. That's the lowest share in modern history. Luxury home sales, which were once the bright spot, are now falling too, down nearly 1%, while luxury inventory rises almost 10%. Even the rich are waiting. Some analysts blame it on something unexpected: artificial intelligence. Capital that once flowed into housing is now being sucked into tech infrastructure and AI development, raising competition for credit and driving up interest costs. In other words, the hottest technology of the decade may be freezing the housing market in ways nobody predicted. By mid-2025, the data became undeniable. Sales at 30-year lows, inventory at multi-year highs, and public confidence fading fast. For many Americans, the dream of homeownership now felt more distant than ever. So what happens next? The lessons of 2025 are stark. First, affordability is everything. You can have strong demand, low unemployment, and optimism, but if people can't pay the mortgage, the market stops. Second, the lock-in effect is real. Homeowners holding 3% mortgages aren't going anywhere, and that's distorting supply. Third, not every market is the same. National averages hide the truth. Some cities are correcting hard, others are barely moving. The next phase of this story will play out region by region, not coast to coast, all at once. And here's the warning. If interest rates remain high and incomes don't catch up, this freeze could last years. The housing market might not crash, but it could decay slowly. Transactions will stay low, mobility will fall, and homeownership could drift further out of reach for millions. That's the kind of quiet crisis that reshapes societies, not overnight, but over decades. So, what should you do? Watch carefully. Understand your local market. Don't rely on national headlines. They're averages, not realities. And most importantly, learn from history. Every bubble, every freeze, every collapse begins the same way, with people assuming this time is different. If you found this story valuable, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell us what you're seeing in your area. Are prices falling, staying flat, or still rising? Let's build a clearer picture together, because the next chapter of the housing story is being written right now, and understanding it might be the only thing standing between opportunity and regret.